Our next guest was on the sideline yesterday, working the game with Jim and Tony on CBS. She is, of course, the great Tracy Wolfson, and she is back with us this morning here on GCR. Tracy, it's Glenn. As you'd imagine, walking into a little bit of a hornet's nest. Not that it's your fault by any stretch of the imagination, but you could imagine the type of morning we're having here in Baltimore. Appreciate you taking the time for us.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And believe me, we were looking forward to the typical Chiefs Ravens matchup that we usually get. I'll tell you, we have not had a good game yet. So we were looking forward to this one. And it didn't pan out the way we expected.
Tracy, what was the feeling like? As obviously the Ravens got off to a great start. They go down, they get a touchdown. That looks like the Ravens offense that we had at least seen for much of the year. Obviously, the interception is where things sort of started to turn and snowball. But what was the feeling like as the injuries mounted, as you had to keep walking back over and asking for more updates? Like, what was the energy like? What was the feeling like on that sideline?
Yeah, I got to be honest, there really was no energy. It was pretty somber. You lose a lot of your leaders, especially on the defensive side of the ball as well. And so it's hard to find that. Lamar was frustrated, especially after the interception, and then you just saw kind of like, as you mentioned, a little bit somber and figuring out like, where are we going from here? And it just kind of escalated. And one injury after another. And then you saw Lamar's face when he decided, when he was dealing with the hamstring injury and the trainers were looking at him, and it was almost like, what do I do kind of feel. And, I think who knows how bad it is, and hopefully it's not. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, in those situations, you just want to be safe, rather than sorry. So overall, I talked to Harbaugh coming out of the locker room, and, I think we all were surprised that Derrick Henry had just 4 rushes in that first half. And, he's one of the guys that can bring that energy. And when he doesn't, when he has just four rushes and, not kind of producing how he should, and not really his fault because he didn't really get the opportunities. And then coach says, not only do we have to get involved in the run game, but in the pass game as well. I think they just needed a spark, and we kind of never saw that.
I'm glad you brought up, because I just want to get your perspective. I think there were people that wondered how legitimate the injury was for Lamar. Being down there, was there any sense, I thought it was absurd, the suggestion that Lamar just quit on, my God,
absurd.
There's just
Completely
no way.
Absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a competitor through and through. He wants this more than anyone. He talked to us in our meetings about the fact that he's not building a man cave until he gets a Lombardi trophy. Forget the Heisman. He does not, he wants this so bad. And so the frustration certainly mounted. And then after the hamstring injury, the frustration was there because of that. And so I think that whole rhetoric is completely ridiculous.
Tracy, you bring up, I'm actually interested, you bring up, you guys have the meetings the night before. I wonder what those conversations were like, and how, how they presented what they believed, what they thought they could fix, and what had gone wrong, and what was the energy like for you in talking to John and Lamar, and I think Derrick was involved with that as well, right, before the game, in comparison to what we saw?
Honestly, John is great. He always is in our meetings, and he felt like they had a really good plan. And, they also fully believe there is, and I said this at the top of the show, that this is, there was a sense of urgency. There's no panic amongst either one of these teams coming into this game. I think both teams feel they could rebound from a 1-3 loss. Not that they wanted that, right? But they feel like they have the team that can rebound from it. I think knowing the injuries were piling up, certainly going into the game, they had to adjust some stuff. That is something that they can't handle, and they just have to wait out. They can't, you can't do really much about that. And, John was very honest with us about the injuries and where they were. And, and then Lamar came in with, excitement, looking forward to it, talking about the environment and how he, it's a college atmosphere and he loves playing there, and how he's looking for that win. And like I said, all the things he's looking forward to this season in hopes of trying to get to that Super Bowl that he wants so bad. And then Derrick Henry came in, pretty as he was all week, remorseful, but confident he was going to get things fixed, which he did, certainly, but wasn't given that many opportunities. I kind of question that a little bit more. Establishing the run, we know always opens up things more, and certainly takes a lot of pressure off Lamar.
And obviously, a lot of the questions being about Derrick Henry, like not being on the field in short yardage situations, which we will not be making sense of, I think, anytime soon. Tracy Wolfson. Tracy is with us here on GCR. Tracy, I feel like we're trying to figure out like how bad really is, and it's very difficult because it's almost like you can't even deal with the underlying problems without knowing the reality of the big picture issues and Roquan Smith's availability and Marlon Humphrey and, Lamar Jackson, who if he misses like real time, then
right.
Come on, like it's not even worth talking about all of this. If it's not as bad, John Harbaugh said afterwards, he didn't think anything was season ending. Like, how bad does it feel like it really is for the Baltimore Ravens at this point at 1-3?
Look, I mean, let's remember who they played so far this season, right? So, they've run into some really good teams, and then they ran into a Kansas City team that played their best game maybe in a few years offensively. They finally they're getting healthier and getting some pieces back, and the defense, as we talked about, was banged up, and so. And Spags is always really good at game planning against Lamar and the Ravens. He has that plan in place, and they came out and they were able to implement it. So I think when you look back at, who they've played, and they have a pretty favorable schedule going forward, that if Lamar is healthy and this was just a little bit of a tweak and, not worth risking it, hopefully he comes back. Am I right? You guys have the Texans next and then a bye week.
The Rams,
you can really get right. You could get some time to regroup, get some guys healthy, and get back out there. And I, like I said, and I kind of agree with John, like certainly this team is not out. There's a lot more football to play. We know what's been happening at any given day and any week in the NFL, and also when it comes to your division. So, I wouldn't throw in the towel just yet. It is still, we just completed just week 4, but certainly the health of this team is paramount, and that's the most important thing.
No doubt. And we'll start, hopefully, get a little information on that from John Harbaugh later today, however much he wants to provide. Tracy, I guess the concern is, like, what happens if it does start to go the other way, right? And that's the part that I can't fully answer to right now, because I agree with you. And anybody calling for blood, they're 1-3. It's the season isn't even a quarter of the way through yet. Like, it's just those conversations are absurd, but they're not absurd later. You know what I mean? Like this. I think the concern is that this does have the potential to snowball, particularly if the injuries continue to linger. And I don't know, like what that conversation becomes and what it looks like, but. I hear what you're saying about the Texans. They did look pretty good yesterday, and if this defense is depleted, it's hard for me to imagine them stopping much of anyone at the moment.
No, I get it, and I understand the fans and certainly quick reaction, and it makes sense, and it's frustrating because you come into the season with such high hopes and an unbelievable team from top to bottom and a team that should make a run at a Super Bowl, no doubt. And it's frustrating when you hit, this situation of all the injuries, which are out of anyone's control. Yes, and the Texans did look good, yesterday. Certainly not going to be an easy game, but a winnable game for the Ravens if Lamar is out there and you get a few guys back. But and maybe change it, some things up a little bit, and maybe it's just a better matchup than the Chiefs. Certainly on the road against a team that was getting healthy and has all their weapons back and was, using that energy, every second of that game, gaining more and more confidence throughout that one. So, I have no answers.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I wish, I'm sure all these fans wish that you can just, have a fairy wand and get some guys, back. But hopefully, whatever happens next week and then after the bye week, there is a little bit of regrouping and changing some thought process and maybe, some schematics. I'm not a coach, so I don't know. But certainly I think in terms of the offense, you can't have your second best player, whatever, co-best player. I mean, whatever you want to call Derrick Henry, not involved in the game plan like they did.
Tracy,
and I don't, we're not second guessing anyone, but I can see the frustration on Derrick's face as well.
No, it doesn't work. There's no doubt. This is not built for that. Tracy, how much did this tell us about the Chiefs? Because we know the Ravens are in a bad way at the moment, but I do think there was far too much writing off of the Chiefs over the course of the first 3 weeks, and I feel like we know better. This is Andy Reid. This is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to suggest that this immediately makes them the favorites in the AFC or anything like that, but I do think it tells us at least a little bit about how much overreaction there was to what we saw from the Chiefs early on in the season.
I mean, we've seen this story so many times, right? I mean, last year, too, they were depleted and they didn't have their wideouts and they had no offensive rhythm and they wind up in a Super Bowl again. So I always take that with a grain of salt. I knew going in, again, like the Ravens, they had a really difficult, first 3 games and including the Ravens. So first 4 games, I mean, they played tough competition. So 1-3, or 1-2 going in. Yeah, frustrating, but like I said, there wasn't much panic. They knew what they had. They knew when they can get Xavier Worthy back, when they get Rashee Rice back in week 7, that they would be that complete team they saw in the offseason, which was an explosive team, something that they're looking to get back to doing, which we haven't seen maybe since, 2020. The crazy stat to me that came out of that game was Patrick Mahomes had 4 touchdowns, and he hasn't had 4 touchdowns since 2023. This team is kind of, what the defense brings. It is one of the top defenses in the NFL. Spags is so good at game planning. And then you have Patrick, who is, going to go all out in every sense of the word and try and win a game, as Lamar would too out there. And they're just gamers. And then put the talent around them. And when you pull Xavier Worthy and you pull Rashee Rice out, everyone can just kind of pull, Travis, double him or take him out of the game, even though he might not be, Travis of old, but he's still a guy you have to key on. I mean, he's still a dangerous weapon. Well, then, who are you going to? It's really easy to game plan against them. Now you saw, and they've developed Tyquan Thornton, Hollywood Brown stepping up, Juju Smith-Schuster stepping up. The amount of weapons that this team has combined with that defense makes it dangerous again. And to be honest, I think it's the team to beat in the AFC. And sure, it's going to come down, the Ravens could be right there. We know we're going to see the Chiefs in Buffalo later on this season. We have that game. It always seems to come down to those 3. We'll see if anyone else kind of steps up and can get into that mix. But yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs are, at this point of the season, way better than they've been in a long time.
Did I see that you all have Denver and Philadelphia next?
We do.
So I'm rooting for you to finally have a good game. I am rooting for that to be the case for your sake.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll have nothing but tush-push conversation for the course of the next few days.
I have to go back and watch that Philly game because obviously I didn't get a chance to, but I heard they did a lot of variations from the tush-push.
And you know what? It makes them all the more dangerous. It makes them all the more dangerous.
Be careful what you wish for. Maybe you just want them to do the tush-push.
Right. At least you know it's coming. That's a great point.
Right.
Tracy, appreciate it. Thank you for giving us a little bit of levity in what has been
hang in there, Glenn.
Morning.
Tell your fans to hang in there. I believe.
Appreciate you as always for spending time with us. Thanks for doing this.
You got it. Bye-bye.